Hi, I'm Rhonda Farrah. Welcome to my show, Fix Your Reflection First. I have had a wealth of life experiences, both good and bad, like everyone, and the one thing I have learned is that I am wholly responsible for the results. As I have evolved to liking the person I see in the mirror, my life has changed for the better, and that is what I help those that I coach do too. Please tune in every week as I will coach folks, listen to stories of success, and give you the tips and tools I have learned to make sure what you see is something you love and help you fix your reflection first. Welcome to Fix Your Reflection First and Live Your Best Life Ever. I'm your host, Rhonda Farrah, and this is Transformation Talk TV Radio Network. Our program, Fix Your Reflection First, is dedicated to awakening hearts, minds, and most especially spirit to our innate power from within, our authentic power from within, the power to thrive and not merely survive. Wherever you are in life, if you are not living the life you want to be living, the life that you desire, perhaps the life that you dream about, you have come to the right place. So happy that you joined us today as we explore how we can be more mindful and make the best version of ourselves happen, make the best version of the life we want to be living happen. And today we have a special guest. We have Sally Mahamdeh. Sally, welcome.
Hi, Rhonda. Thank you for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. Let me tell you a little bit about Sally. With over a decade of tech giants like Microsoft and Google, Sally transitioned to a full-time career in emotional and positive intelligence coaching in February of 2024 after 4 years of side hustling. Today, she supports kind hearts with intense lives to move away from chronically overwhelming rhythm that they may be caught up in. Sally draws an extensive training in behavioral science and her degree in management. Our episode today is titled From Burnout to Brilliance, and Sally Mahamdeh teaches the principles of emotional and positive intelligence to help us shift from burnout, stress, and anxiety to a life of bliss and brilliance. Again, welcome, Sally.
Wow, Rhonda, that was amazing. I love how you introduced me. Thank you.
You're very welcome. How about introduce yourself a little bit to our listeners and our viewers?
What would I add to what you just said? Maybe
Well,
just a bit, maybe just a bit before, the 13 years in tech.
Yes.
I was born in Palestine. I grew up there and I lived 18 years there before moving to France. I moved to France because I got a merit scholarship and I was very happy about that scholarship. But to be honest, there was no plan. I was just going to go study and go back home. And I think one of the first big decisions I can remember taking for myself, other than really working hard for getting that scholarship, was the decision of staying in France. I think I was young and I didn't realize that back then I had already decided not to just survive, but to thrive. And I felt better in that new country that I had adopted for myself, as a female, as someone who was aspiring for an ambitious career, but even also as someone who's really sensitive and who had to just, create a safe space for herself. And then those 13 years in tech happened, and there was a lot of traveling involved, and that was, I think it changed the way I saw the world. My world was very confined. It was the Middle East and then France, and then all of a sudden there was this big opening to the rest of the world. And I really enjoyed that part, and that remains with me now, which is why I'm doing this interview with you, and I'm so grateful to be doing this interview with you.
Sally, it's our pleasure to have you here. So you were traveling for Google and Microsoft. Is that why you were traveling?
Yeah,
And
I
how,
would.
where did they send you? All over the place?
Mostly to the US and Middle East, Africa, Europe. Basically, I would cover either clients, partners, projects in this zone, the EMEA zone, as we would call it. But most of my
Mhm.
training, the annual gatherings, I would speak at events, those would be in the US. And I was really grateful for that because I had that double experience. I was based in one place, but my reality of the world was not confined or limited to that place. And so that traveling happened because I spoke different languages. That was one of the biggest gifts my parents gave me. They were really open and flexible to many things, but they just always, always insisted on the languages because they said that's how you create relationships. That's how you meet people from different parts of the world. So because I spoke those relationships, it was easy for me to move around move around the globe, give a presentation in Arabic one day, and then 1 week later I'm doing the same one in French. And I really, honestly, I was young, I did not realize all of that, but now I'm thinking about those things and I realized that I love that. I love this openness, I love this limitless reality, and I want to make sure that my day-to-day life is always composed of that in addition to everything else.
Wonderful. So, how many countries did you actually travel to?
I'm laughing as you ask the question because I never counted. I never
Okay.
counted. I recently met someone who told me I traveled to 99 countries. How many countries have you traveled to? And I told him I never counted. I have a map and I put a heart every time I go to a country and I get to experience the country. So sometimes
Nice.
we don't I didn't get that in the past. I just go do these presentations, shake hands and then go. In my heart, I wouldn't feel like I visited the country because I didn't go, I didn't talk to the people locally. I didn't leave the office or the client's building. So in that sense, I don't know if I can say that I visited the country, but when I was able to actually stay and meet around with people and just, like go around by myself and discover, I would put a heart on a world map. So I need to count them, but I don't even know. I don't even know. I'd say many.
Many. Okay. Was there one place in particular that changed your life, would you say?
Wow. Your questions are really good. I think I had, there were three travels I would say that just really changed the course of my life as a whole. I think the first time I went to South Africa, it was for work, and I went for a corporate visit. So in a way, I was prepared as the corporate world would prepare you. You know, be very, be cautious, take care, do this, do that. And the moment I arrived, I mean, I landed in Johannesburg, and then I had the meetings I needed to take, and I just the meetings were over. So I went over and I went out and I, just started walking with my colleagues. And then the next day we had meetings in Cape Town and the client got sick, but we had our flights booked. So we went to Cape Town and we were able to have a full couple of days for ourselves. And I had the most amazing time. And I remember thinking, I am so happy that I was not just stuck with that corporate policy that I got, the reports you get before you travel to one place or another. It had nothing to do with what I had experienced. And when I was talking with someone from there, the person said, I think it's the same with the Middle East. When someone goes to the Middle East, they get this security report that says, don't go there, don't go there. This place is, this is not safe, this is not safe. And the person says, but do you feel safe when you're here with us? I said, I've never felt this good. It was just vibrant, culturally speaking. The people were so kind and generous. It was beautiful. And when you get to visit the museums and to know about the story, you just feel so strongly about their story, about the struggles they have been through. I mean, sometimes, you read things and you think this was 100 years ago, not in South Africa. So I think the first time I went there, it must have been 2015 or 2016. I remember going back and thinking, I'm never, ever gonna just like pause and stop at what a security report on a, I don't know, government's website or a, like corporate website says. I need to have my own sense of how a country feels and how the people feel and how safe I feel, especially when the person told me the Middle East is like that too. For us, you know, when someone doesn't know the Middle East, they tell you all these sorts of scary things. And then you get to go there and you're just so
Yes.
amazed by the beauty, the generosity, the kindness of the people. So that was one of those trips that really got me to understand that if I don't pay attention to the kind of information that people will push, you know, towards me, I'm gonna be influenced. And if I get to make my own opinion, that's 10 times better because my opinion will be based on my experience, not on what someone else said. And
Yes.
that was one of those, you know, travels that changed my life. And then the second one was French Polynesia. So it's many islands that the French, the English, I mean, colonized over centuries. Now it's part of France, but as a whole independent entity. And they are, I mean, out of all the cultures I've experienced and got to visit, they're incredible, Rhonda. They live a life. I mean, we went to 7 islands, so we got to experience them in, you know, different settings and in different places. Some islands were big, like Bora Bora, very well known by the tourists, and so it was a life. But then you go to a smaller island, and people had a different life. And we went there. It was just 2 years after COVID, and they were just so relaxed. It was not like fake relaxation. They were just like relaxed. They were anchored. They were grounded. That's the word. They were grounded. And we had the most amazing conversations. That was the year I just had paused after my burnout. I was really recovering, taking care of my mental health. My husband, my 2-year-old, and I, we went there for a whole month. We disconnected from the internet. We just turned off our phones, let our families know that if anything happened, we would reach out. But if nothing did, then we would just appreciate that disconnection. And literally, we just lived like the locals. We would travel from island to island, stay with the locals, talk with the locals. And I think when I left, that was January 2023, I promised myself to never, ever go back to having just this overwhelming, intense life full of humanly made deadlines. Because they had real deadlines. You know, for
Yeah.
example, for some islands, they would need the boat to come and bring them food. Otherwise, they would say, well, we don't have salt for the week because the boat did not come. And that was it, you know, the whole week. I mean, I took salt, but imagine something bigger, something more important. And they would just like cope with it. There's no water, so, you know, we're taking the water from the rain, and then we're gonna do this and that. And they would just say it so simply, as if it was nothing. And I would just sit there and look at them in awe, like, can anyone do that? But that's the mindset, that's life. They don't even challenge the fact that they're this grounded.
It's interesting because you were in a world of not only deadlines, but of bureaucracy.
Yeah,
Totally
absolutely.
different from what we'd expect for grounding, at least us in the transformation business. So, in many ways, my sense is that that world of technology that you were living
Mm,
gave you the alternative to say, no, I don't want this for myself. And you made a transition. You made your own transformation into what you call emotional and positive intelligence. Can you speak about that, the transition, and what exactly is emotional, positive
absolutely.
intelligence?
So those are, I would say, 2 disciplines that I really appreciate and love. They come from, so emotional intelligence is the capacity to understand ourselves, identify our emotions, and then when we have those skills, we are able to self-regulate. We sometimes talk about self-management. I don't like the term management when it comes to emotions, so I prefer regulation.
Mm-hmm.
And those skills, so there are 6 skills in all, allow us to then understand others, read others' emotions, and then just try to understand what's happening for them. Why are they feeling this angry about something, or why does something make so much sense? It also allows us to influence them. It also allows us to create this trusting relationship. So though it's a set of skills, and I remember just reading a book. It was written by Daniel Goleman. It was called Why Your EQ Should Matter More Than Your IQ. It was one of his first books. It was published in 95. I loved that book. I loved it because of I'm saying the word multiple times, limitless. He talks about the limitless potential of developing an emotional quotient versus an intellectual quotient. Because when it comes to emotional skills, it's literally exponential. Like the growth you can create is exponential. It only depends on your intent and your desire to grow. And the more you practice, the better you get. Whereas your intellectual quotient is really determined by your genetics. And by age 12, there's actually no way to increase it. You can practice as much as you want, the math, the physics, but your capacity intellectually is going to be really determined by something that's out of your hands. Whereas your emotional intelligence is really totally reliant on your practice. And it really combines many things. It's a bit of psychology because Daniel Goleman was a psychologist, but it also has neuroscience. And it also has mindfulness because he studied mindfulness and the relationship with mindfulness on being able to better self-regulate. So I think that was one of my the first times I fell in love with this practice, and it really helped me. I mean, I started practicing this in 2015 when I read his book, but then I got into coaching for emotional intelligence in 2019. And to be fully honest with you, it's the year that I paused my practice. So pausing the practice means disconnecting from yourself, not asking yourself every morning, how do I feel this morning? And then at the end of the day, how do I feel now? And what has happened throughout the day for me to feel the way that I do? It really requires you to check in with yourself, ask yourself questions, and it even requires journaling because it's the only way you can actually see what's going on for your mind. Your mind has almost, like an inside life. We used to call it the secret life of the brain because the brain, I mean, so much happens in a day, so many thoughts, so many decisions. So that checking in, it's the practice. And I fell in love with that practice. And the year I neglected my practice, it was because I returned from maternity leave after COVID. So 1 year of working remote, directly back to the office with all of the events and the, like that intensity. And I just assumed, I mean, unconsciously, Sally, you don't have time, right? You have a baby, work, you're commuting, you don't have time. And then just literally after 6 months, I felt like I was emotionally collapsing. Just so many emotions were accumulating and I was unable to regulate. And I remember that moment. I was traveling back with my husband and my daughter. We had went to the Middle East, to Palestine, to visit my parents. The situation was really intense and crazy over there. And when we went back, I was worried about the quarterly business review I had to deliver the next morning. So my husband was sleeping on one shoulder, my daughter was in my hands, and I was thinking, oh, Sally, you need to check in. Something is off. I mean, you have just, been to a really intense place. There's so much you witness when you go to the Middle East, and you have two of your dearest people here. You just left two of your dearest people there. Both my parents still live there, and you're worried about the QBR. Who cares about the QBR? And I remember that moment of clarity. I took a piece of paper and a pen. I asked the hostess, I was in the plane, and I just started writing. And that was the first time I had written after, 6 months of totally posing. And I realized, Sally, you just need to check in. You need your practice. The moment I stop practicing, I disconnect from myself and I don't even know what's happening for me. I feel things, I'm unable to name them, unable to say what happened from, what started the first emotion and what got me to the biggest one. So this is my emotional intelligence practice. At least that's how I experience it. That's how I love to coach for it. And the positive
That's it.
intelligence bit,
Go ahead.
yeah, the positive, that's another layer. I would say it's like it's like a cake and there are layers. And the positive intelligence bit is based on emotional intelligence, so also psychology and neuroscience, but it adds a bit that's mainly focused on positive psychology, and it's all about recovery. So how do we recover from the negative emotions? In these kind of practices, I love that we always base the practice on the fact that every emotion is welcome. Not all behaviors are welcome, but every emotion is welcome and every emotion is beneficial because it gets us to know a little bit more about the brain. And so the positive intelligence practice is really about recovery. So if I feel super negative about something and I feel so strongly about it, instead of being mad at myself for having that negative emotion, being ashamed of myself for having that negative emotion, or even worse, being angry at other people because I have this emotion and I'm able to regulate, the practice requires to just pause and ask, what's showing up for me? Why do I care so much about this topic? What is happening for this other person if I'm interacting with someone? How do I recover? How do I not get stuck in that negativity? And this is a practice I discovered only last year. And I mean, with the war and everything going on, it was so useful for me because there were moments where I had so much anger around that I was unable to deliver my bigger mission. I wanted to serve my clients, I wanted to offer free webinars, but there was all this anger and it was stuck in me and I was unable to recover. And I was so grateful that someone, a therapist, who's also a really good friend, told me about this practice, introduced me to the person who's really developing it. And then I got coached by him for 6 months. And it just gave me so much spaciousness despite everything going on. It allowed me to function also, despite everything going
So
on.
here we are, Sally, at Fix Your Reflection First and Live Your Best Life Ever. And that's my practice. So there was a point where you looked at your reflection, maybe in a mirror or maybe not, and you said, what's really going on here? Am I liking what I see still?
Mm.
Am I liking who I see still? Am I loving whom I see? And it sounds like that was your cue to make this transition. And I'm especially, you talk about, we talk about so much that is so much in line with what I do and what I aspire to, what I know. But the one thing is you've also got a rule
Mm.
for living a healthy love relationship, which caught my attention.
Mm.
Okay, for several reasons, but this is your time. Okay, so you looked in the mirror maybe one day and you said, "Now I need to make a change. There's a change coming. It's not only it's coming whether I want to make it or not." And then you
Mm.
develop this rule for a healthy love relationship. Would you speak to us about that?
I um I think I realized that it is so it's just complicated. Like being a human being, I find that complicated because so much can happen in our own heads. And then being in interaction with another person, that also is complicated because so much can happen in their own head. And then you have to interact, all the chemistry that happens in that interaction. And I have to say that the first 26 years of my life, I would fall in love, feel so strongly about the friendship, would love it working with a manager, with a colleague. And then I would feel so angry because that person, for example, did not consider did not consider my needs before considering theirs, or that person would say something that I would find inconsiderate, or the person would do something that would put pressure on me. And I remember when I started my emotional intelligence practice, one of the things that I loved learning was you need to have a few certainties, just a few things you are certain about. It's okay to doubt pretty much everything, but your brain, just for the sake of its health, you need to know that a few things are for certain. And one of the first things that I chose to believe is that everyone has good intentions and that no
Yes.
one is doing anything to hurt me personally. The day I shared that with one of the coaches at the foundation, she offered me a beautiful book by Miguel Ruiz, The Four Agreements. I loved that book. I loved that book, loved every page, every bit, every word. And it was written in there, don't ever make assumptions. I love that rule. So that rule has saved my relationships. Because now when
Mm-hmm.
things happen, I am aware that something has accumulated either for me or for the person across from me. This person
Mm-hmm.
has no poor intentions. They are not trying to hurt me. I'm a highly sensitive person. And now I know how a highly sensitive brain works. So I know that I will be more in tune to the words and the body language and the energy. Maybe the other people don't or won't, but it's not because they don't have the intentions. And it's not because they're not putting in the effort, which is the other thing that my brain would systematically tell me. Sally, they're not putting in the effort. They don't care. They're trying to hurt you. And so the moment I just agreed with myself that those are the things I'm going to be certain about, it really transformed my relationship with my husband, with my daughter, with everyone I love. Because now I
Mhm.
just assume when there's poor behavior, that the person sitting across from the table or the whatever we are, they don't have poor intentions. Something is happening for them. I don't know what that is, so I need to investigate. And that, that it's like a dance, but it has become natural for me. My daughter
Yeah.
throws a tantrum, and instead of saying, she's throwing a tantrum, she's being terrible, I ask her, what's happening for you? Can you explain to mommy what's showing up for you? Because mommy doesn't understand. And when my husband is acting poorly, I sit with him and I say, how are you doing? Are you okay? Are you stressed? Before I would say, why are you doing this? Or why would you say this? I would just attack. And
Yeah.
in a way, people, they are just so surprised when you ask that question, Rhonda, because we don't take the time to ask.
No, we
We
don't.
don't, we don't, right? We're so busy reacting. We're so busy responding so quickly. And that has become my rule. So now I speak about kindness being the foundation of everything I do, even business wise. Um, I shared recently that I was working with a provider. The provider was really having a lot of delays to deliver, and so they would commit on deadlines, and then they would not meet the deadline. So I had to have a few crucial conversations with them this summer. The first time I asked if everything was okay, he said, "Yeah, great," but then there was still delay. Second time I asked, and third time I said, the reason I'm asking is because we're not meeting the deadlines, and I would love
Mm.
to know if something is happening for you. I don't want you to, just act tough in front of me, think that I would think less of you. I think not meeting the deadlines is hurting both of us. I just need to understand if this is the habitual way of working. And if so, I would love that we incorporate a few changes. And if not, I really hope you're okay. And he
Mm.
just like literally started crying because he was not okay.
Wow.
And that
And you
has
picked
become
up
really the foundation.
it. You listen to your heart space
Oh,
then, and that's where it begins. Begins here. The emotions create a thought, and the thought
yeah,
creates our external world.
absolutely. Absolutely. And I would say
You're doing
that has been the biggest found shift for me in terms of my relationships, the way I carry myself.
yes. You're doing some fantastic work. Let me ask, how can our viewers or listeners get a hold of you? What's the best way? It will appear in the episode description, but you talk to us about that.
Hmm. There are different ways. I love coaching people. So coaching involves working directly one-on-one. It's
Mhm.
different from therapy, even though a lot of my work is based on behavioral therapy and cognitive therapy. But I'm not a therapist. If someone has gone through trauma or if someone has a pathology, I personally redirect them towards a therapist or a psychologist that I know, depending on the country where they're at. Most of my work is really based about changing the mental and emotional habits, and it's most of the work is based on mindfulness. So if people are open to if they're open to that experience, so it's I would say it requires a few weeks of work. Generally, I work with people 3 months. That's the minimum because that's really when we start getting the results and seeing the change and building on the change. After less than 6 weeks, it's possible to start incorporating change, but the whole goal is to sustain it, right? So generally, I work with people through coaching. I do one-on-one, and I'm moving into also cohort coaching later in the year. And I love to do that kind of work. I generally assess with them what are their needs, what's really most challenging, and based on that I choose the best direction that we can take. Because now that I have trained in mindfulness, in emotional intelligence and positive intelligence, I really kind of mix the method of many depending on where I meet the client. Sometimes the client they're living in such an intense life, Rhonda, that really my priority is just to unintense that mode. So I try to create just 1 minute or 2 minutes of break a day, and we gradually increase that until they get 30 minutes a day just to breathe, to get a sense of
Mhm.
themselves and what's showing up for them. And sometimes I get leaders, I get parents who want to, just increase their EQ. When they show up, that's how They show up, they say, Sally, I hear you're an emotional intelligence trainer. I want to work with you. And so there's no urgency. I don't see that my client is in a burnout state. They're not in a very intense mode. And that's a kind of a different coaching, because then we move into facilitation and training, and I'm able to walk them through a few practices. We can even do an assessment of their emotional quotient. And I love that kind of work too. I mean, I'm passionate about both areas, helping someone who is really in a very intense phase of life, because that's where I was, and that's where my burnout really impacted me. But I also just love sharing and really, I would say, just transferring the knowledge that I gained, and giving it as a gift to someone else who can then share it with someone else. So there's this work, and then there's also training. I work with leaders who have, I would say, medium-sized teams. I mean, I spent 13 years working in very, very big corporations, and I feel like the biggest of change can happen when we can connect with people and have honest and candid conversations. So now I limit any training to the maximum of 25 to 30 people. I'm very open to traveling. So I'm going to be, in the next 3 months, I'm going to be delivering training outside of France, and I'm excited about that. But I have a condition, that the person who sponsors the training really cares about their people. I don't want anyone to buy a training to just hit a quota of diversity, inclusion, training, whatever. I want the sponsor to care. And I have a very easy way to validate that. I start asking them questions about the team and the challenges. And I know by their answers if they're really involved with the team or if they're just trying to tick a box. Because it's sad, but mindfulness, emotional intelligence, those words, they became buzzwords. They're, leaders, they want to use those words and they're happy to use them. But I just really want to make sure that the time I dedicate to a team, to a leader, to a corporation, that's really used for the right purposes, and that it's really going to help someone shift the way they're experiencing their work, their days at work, or the way they're being managed. So those are, I would say, the different areas where I've been working, mainly training, facilitating, and coaching. And I really adapt what I deliver depending on where the need is or how I assess the situation. And the intensity, I love that you used that word multiple times during this interview. I would say that's my compass, Rhonda. Just see if the person who's sitting across from me has mental space. And if they do, there's so much fun that we can do. But if they don't, my biggest urgency is to create space with them so that the fun can come later.
Well, we are about at the end of our time, unfortunately, but this was so insightful, and this was, I think, the mark when people look in the mirror and say, okay, do I like who I see? Do I like what I see? What can I change? And I would say, let's go see Sally. Let's go talk to Sally about one thing or another, especially those in the corporate world, especially those who are in the minutia of everything that's so structured and so intellectual versus from the heart space. So thank you, Sally. All Sally's information will be in our episode description. But in closing today, I would give us all a reminder that regardless of the struggles, of the challenges that we are facing, we have the opportunity, if we choose, to let that all serve us, whatever it is, rather than anything less. So whatever tunnel you happen to be traveling down, the light at the end of it, know that it is not necessarily a train, because I believe that that light is the way, the guidance. It's the opportunity to move forward and be the best version of yourself. So thank you for joining us today, Sally. Thank you so much for your insights. You are certainly a thriver, which is what we aim to do here, not merely survive and live life in default mode. Thrive. I'm Rhonda Farrah, and you have been listening to Transformation Talk Television Radio Network. And until next time, have a very beautiful day every day. And I invite you to treat life as if it were ice cream and enjoy it before it melts. Bye for now. I'm Rhonda Farrah, and you have been listening to Fix Your Reflection First. Tune into Transformation Talk Radio every first and third Monday at 3 p.m. Pacific Time for success stories of folks I have coached. I will be sharing more of my tips and tools that you can use to love the person you see in the mirror and how to fix your reflection first. Live your best life ever by choosing to be bold and courageous, even if it means getting out of your comfort zone. To connect with me, visit helpmerhondanow.com.